simmer is doing it out of the box and away from the corporate fascist world.
And it does work for a lot of people.
It sure does. And it'll have to work for everyone because that world is currently dying.
Yes, it is. And again, that gets back to right in the very beginning. We talked about that the universe is pushing people around, and if you're losing your job, it's asking you to look in different directions in order to sustain your life and to carry on.
Right.
It's just that's the way the energies are running.
Right, and it's actually, it's a lot harder to have to go out and think for yourself as opposed to just nodding your head and saying, yeah, boss, I'll go do that.
Well, I think people are now questioning that yeah, boss sometimes doesn't work very well because yeah, boss is...
Sure, ends up with where you're out of work, right.
Yeah, there is no loyalty, you see, and I think people are really waking up to that. And if they haven't, they will. Yes,
I suspect that the unemployment situation, again, there's another aspect of the duality that we see coming in through the Populous USA entity, and that is that the reason that the press is out running around desperately looking for good news stories is because the bad news stories are starting to pile up to the point where even they're going to have a hard time putting a spin on them because the unemployment rates are going to, in the process of, now it's all interconnected, so let me back up a little bit.
Sure.
As the dollar collapses, the federal government's going to do this review, if you will, this revision process and start lopping off chunks of itself that it just isn't able to pay for anymore, old obsolete programs and so on and so forth, right?
Right.
Different entitlement groups that there's so few people left to be entitled that the ones who get screwed in it either have no power or are so non-numerous as to not be a problem. Now, when they do this, there's going to be a bunch of unintended side effects. Some of those unintended consequences are going to include, according to our data, subcontractors and direct government employees who are going to be thrown out of work with no real the possibility of finding other jobs and are going to have to turn to doing something to make a living. And some of them are going to say, I know all these secrets. Now, how can I make money selling what I know in terms of secrets because I worked for the government for X number of years? And so that's going to cause other problems relative to the good news, bad news situation, because when these people come on out, some of the first things they're going to come out and say is that the government's been lying about all these numbers that are coming out, which we all know, which we all acknowledge. The Bureau, BLS, Bureau of Lying Statisticians.
That's right.
Okay, and the unemployment number is not whatever they're claiming. It's probably 2 to 3 times as high as that.
Sure.
And if you actually looked at it and were accurate about it in terms of people that can't find work, you'd be staggered because you'd find that perhaps if you looked at the demographics, perhaps any male over 50, if he loses his job, that's it. He'll never find another one. So the numbers are being totally skewed, but the government's about to lop off chunks of themselves that will then open up this floodgate of whistleblowers, and we'll start hearing about this. And so again, we get back into the self-compounding duality issue.
Yep, and it's going to continue, and I think the more that we educate people, and these, your reports have shown, and the more this information gets out, the better it is, so that people can really be prepared. And I just think the knowledge is what's most important here. Right.
But we're running, as we say, we're racing time.
We are.
That's one of our issues, is the immediacy data is piling up.
Yes.
And,
as is all the other things, right?
Yep.
Let's jump forward to the Space Goats part.
Sure.
Parts. Still love your names that you have these things. It's just, what an imagination. Love it. So tell us what's going on with that in this last series here.
Well, in part 6, again we get a link back to this whole coagulation, is what we called it, the coagulation or condensation or tightening of the federal government into a thick syrupy mass, and little bits and pieces of it being thrown away, and that's going to again cause people to want to be whistleblowers, and a huge chunk of these guys that are going to come out as whistleblowers are going to be of the technical class that were casually brushed off in this downsizing, and they don't have anywhere to go and so on. It'll take a while after they've lost their job and burned through their unemployment before they start thrashing around and saying, maybe I'd better contact this tabloid and tell them for the last 15 years my job has been to airbrush photos for NASA. And boy, can I show you this stuff, and oh yeah, I managed to get a few negatives out, and this kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that That wave of whistleblowers is within our unknown and officially denied subset of data, which we labeled space goat farts.
Right.
And it shows that we're going to get into a very serious level of increase of discussion on the contact meme, independent of any actual further manifestation of that. So just because the whistleblowers are going to come on out and start telling what they know is going to be a very interesting summer, fall, and winter as we have a sort of an internal review here mainly in the U.S., that is to say that area is dominated by NASA, as to what they really know.
Well, and you know, I think that it's starting on a somewhat of that's already starting. It's just not maybe some of the big boys yet.
Oh yeah, it'll take a while. Yeah.
But I still think some of the lower echelon, if you will, I really hate using those terms, but you know, the lower echelon, I think some of those people, because those are going to be the first ones to go. They've already started coming out and presenting different ideas, and you know, there's a lot of people that's coming forward. And it's just, I think you're right in those reports. I think it's just going to get monumentally huge with the information.
It's just going to, according to our stuff here, it's just going to be a wave of it, such that by the time we reach March of 2010, anybody who is in denial about the contact between humans and, let's say, off-world intelligence or interdimensional whatever, will have to actively be in denial. I mean, they'll have to actively not want to hear it because it'll be everywhere.
Well,
again, that's kind of cool. It should be very interesting.
Well, and I'm not sorry about it. I'm not sorry about it. It's way past time.
Yeah.
It's way past time. All right, let's go into the next segment here, which is Terra blankets, floats, and
chimneys.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting stuff here.
Yeah, we have a tendency to find that archetypes end up with the same linguistics stretching across differing subjects. So, for instance, we have blankets in the sense of the surreal label from the weather. This whole undeniability is going to cause people to think the world's changing and their whole point of view, their whole relationship with the universe is changing, and their perception will change. And to them, it'll be very much like the Alice in Wonderland kind of going down the rabbit hole and seeing all these strange things and not knowing how to put it all together. And that's going to descend across the whole planet in such a way that we decided, well, that it's going to be more or less a blanket effect. Not getting everybody, but a whole large number of, or let me just say that the larger mass of the unaware are going to experience some cognitive dissonance issues over summer that will lead them to probably end up using and really understanding what the word surreal means. Most of it appears that we'll get some big peak towards the dog days of summer, the mid-July through mid-August period. And that's going to be interesting there because it does appear that that'll be pretty much weather-related and will be related to jet stream. So is it going to be snow in the middle of summer in odd places? Maybe so, simply because the jet stream is going to be behaving really, really strange and will contribute to this whole undeniability. We don't really have much in the way of details saying that, it's going to be, a zebra-shaped hailstorm in New York in the middle of July. On the other hand, what we do get says that the people across the northern hemisphere will start understanding about the undeniability factor. And that really, the blanket approach goes on down to the chemtrails and the issues there. We had noted in previous reports that chemtrails would come out as a mainstream subject, and we see that, Obama's administration is actively talking about planetary-wide weather engineering.
Right.
Using many of the 402 patents that relate to chemtrails.
Right.
So, in fact, that's coming out. Another part of that we had spoken about goes back to whether or not they can continue to do it. Because, again, it's the whole money issue. It costs a lot of money to buy all that kerosene to fuel all those jets to pump out all those chemicals that you spent a lot of money buying. And the chemicals are not cheap. And it's going to get to the point where the powers that be at the Obama administration level, the political elite level, will actually have to start having a public discourse as to how much is the planet, that is to say the rest of us, willing to pay to support this effort to stop the, dreaded global warming or whatever they're going to phrase it in terms of that. It'll be a fear campaign as well, just to try and keep the chemtrails going. But it at least will bring it up to some level of public debate.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, here they've been doing this for I don't know how many years, and now all of a sudden, just like everything else, it's going to be part of mainstream information, and again, it just is. It really takes off the rose-colored glasses. Each aspect that your reports bring out just peels off those rose-colored glasses, another layer of them.
And you find out how interconnected all of this is. It's just, you start in on one thing and it leads you to the next, and then you make the mistake of looking to the left or right, and you find out that stuff over there is connected.
Yep. Well,
yep.
And it's just like you and I and everybody else, we're all interconnected, so, it stands to reason. It's not a starting or stopping point. You can't go back and just pinpoint, well, here's where it began. It began and is a widespread thing, and it's been an interesting ride, to say the least. We have about 4 or 5 minutes, I think, something like that. We have about 8 minutes. I was way off on my timing. Whoa. We have about 8 minutes left. What else in the Terra blankets can we talk about? Or do we have time?
The real important part is the big squeeze,
the
magnetic pressure cooker effect. There's a lot of actual science on the Russian and Polish, to only speak of two, science journals supporting the idea that the magnetic ribbon at the middle section of the Milky Way that we're currently transiting with our solar system, and which we peak at its most dense part on the 21st of December 2012, is indeed a giant magnetic pressure cooker, if you will. And it is not that our magnetic systems within our solar system are weakening. It is that they are being dampened down by the more giant, more pressing galactic magnetic system. So in other words, the swirling red spot, the perpetual storms on Jupiter and Saturn have been scrunched down into smaller sizes. And we find that the sun is quiet. Well, it's not quiet because it's getting weak or anything, but it's quiet because it's getting pressured. So it doesn't have much opportunity to get into the situation of throwing filaments off and developing cold magnetic spots, which is really all sunspot is because of the greater galactic magnetism that's pushing that down, pushing the heliopause down, the heliosphere, the magnetic sphere around the Earth, etc. And that also is probably what's causing the bad driving in Kansas. No, seriously.
Well,
and if you're not
sleeping
sleeping well because the magnetism, or your eyes are a bit wonky or something along these lines.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because right after that, I started having people come to me and go, "Man, I haven't slept. I just can't sleep. Doesn't matter what I do. I take a sleeping pill. I still can't sleep." So so it begins.
Right, exactly, and that we've seen for a long time, and that's been a big contributor to the whole idea that we'll have people walking around just suddenly stop in the middle of a street and just sort of stand there, spaced out, and it's because their poor sleep has caught up with them, and they just can't go anywhere, and the extra magnetism is monkeying with their brain.
So anywhere in there, do you have any advice for people as far as how we can protect ourselves from the excessive magnetism?
Okay, now this is where it gets really dangerous.
All right.
You got to be real careful.
Okay.
But I'll be straight out with you.
Good.
There are some suggestions that the powers that be are interested in some substances, but people should not go out and buy this stuff without knowing their bodies, without being really careful about it, because these substances are very expensive, and once ingested, you can't get rid of them necessarily. But it seems as though the powers that be, or rather, let me put it this way.